Leading change at large scale is not an easy task. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. Third, it's accepted as being self-evident. What do you see when you enter an Escuela Nueva school or a learning environment? Students are working in small groups. Some are working in groups, others are working by themselves, others are working in pairs. Each person seems to know what they're doing, even though they're doing different things. If you ask them what they're doing, they can explain not only what they're learning, but how they're learning. They're learning through observation, reflection, working individually in groups. They're receiving feedback from their teachers, sharing their works with others, taking initiative. And they're learning at their own pace, self-paced learning. And the teacher has a different role, which is the real new role of the teacher for the 21st century. So this is why it's so happy, because constraints force you to innovate. And what we started responding to the needs of all these low-income schools is now called the role of the teacher for the 21st century. So it's a new role of the teacher as a facilitator instead of a transmitter of facts, that has more time to know their students, to give feedback during the process, to help slow learners, to motivate, to have empathy, to facilitate, to make the next level of questioning. This is an Escuela Nueva, a type of school where students collaborate, participate, take initiatives, and cooperative learning. They're learning today about looking into their eyes, dialoguing. Learning takes place through dialogue and interaction. It's relationships. And these are the 21st century skills everybody's talking about. Learning to learn, learning to take initiatives, learning to work, especially in teams. And this is what business firms are looking for. And this is the essence of Escuela Nueva, learning how to work in teams. I'll mention just one small feature. This is not new. Children have student governments and committees, and they learn to participate and have genuine responsibilities. But through here, we promote the involvement and leadership of both girls and boys in equal footing. I once asked a boy what he thought about the fact that the president of the student government was a girl, and he replied, "She's great. She's much more organized," and continued working without a problem. So there's an implicit cultural change from our traditional macho culture to a really promotion of women and leadership skills. So what's so innovative about this? Most of us have learned that way, especially many of you that have been here. You have been exposed to good quality learning. But this is not the case of low-income public schools in developing countries, nor in Latin America, nor in Africa, nor in Asia. The ideas on which we built the model are not new. They're grounded in solid educational theory. What is new is how did we scale up? How did we make this possible to 20,000 schools in Colombia initially? It's been picked up by many countries, reaching countries like Vietnam at this moment. It's more than 5 million children have been exposed to this in many Latin American countries and beyond, not through us, mainly through their governments. So the first issue was how to lead change. How can a local innovation become a national policy? That's what everybody wants. So we managed to transform complexity into simple, manageable action so that any teacher without having a PhD in the middle of the jungle could transform their learning environment and have results, not only in academic achievement, but in peaceful democratic behavior. Because we had to think of something that was replicable, scalable, and effective. In education, you have to touch attitudes and behaviors. So we started to think how we introduce in the daily routines of teachers and classrooms these issues. So it's how to lead change. So the first thing we had to think was, we started this through the government, which is the toughest part. Bureaucracies are very complicated. And you say, oh my God, we reached scale, it became a national policy, whatever that means. No, that's the toughest part. Beating around the system was the most difficult part. So this forced us into bottom up, another key word. We had to hide from the system. We had to protect the innovation. So we had to first have innovations in place so that other teachers could say, we can do it. To introduce change, you need visual images to lead change. And to have other teachers do the same so that teachers can have a demand-driven approach. If you start a reform top-down by decree, that doesn't work. So we had to have innovations in place to ignite change, so the teachers could see that others were doing it. So we started having horizontal dissemination of innovations. The teachers themselves started to do the changes. So this was, and the second thing was not leave them alone. If we want to change attitudes and behaviors of teachers and show results, we couldn't leave them alone. We also had to change the way of training the teachers, compensating for what faculties of education were not doing, that they live the same experiential methodologies. So it's not only the innovation per se, but how to introduce innovation in the system. Okay, so it became a national policy. It reached 20,000 schools. The horse won the game. Because from the outset, we had to make that anything we did was technically feasible, that any teacher could do it. Politically feasible. Unions are strong in Latin America, so we needed that the teachers themselves take the leadership. And financially feasible, so that we could reach great numbers. If you can only reach a small number of schools that are scientifically interesting but cannot have big impact. So it was how to do it, how to impact. So we started with this dissemination bottom up, from child to child, from teacher to teacher, from school to school. We started to grow organically. So this is important to think about change, bottom up and organically. So then comes the next stage. I ended up being Vice Minister of Education, where I gave it total support, 20,000 schools, and the horse won the race. Then, once the World Bank selected it as one of the 3 innovations that had successfully impacted national policies, and once we had good scientific empirical results. UNESCO did a wonderful study, and Colombia at that moment was the only country after Cuba where rural schools outperform urban schools, except to the megacities. But the most important thing is a study from the University of London showing the impact of Escuela Nueva on peaceful democratic behavior. So I mean, this coming out of Colombia is especially important. So this started our internationalization process. Countries started coming in, being inspired, and picking it up. So we started taking Escuela Nueva, sending Colombian teachers abroad. But leading change at large scale is not an easy task, as Jeff Mulgan says from Nesta. He writes in a recent document on social innovation, from quoting Schopenhauer, on any truth. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. Third, it's accepted as being self-evident. Escuela Nueva passed through all these stages. So the last stage was, once it's scaled up, it's spread out through many countries that we cannot control what they're doing, we had to create. Then once you scale up, then you have to scale down. We had to create an NGO. I had to create an NGO, what I'm directing right now, Fundación Escuela Nueva, because we wanted to control the quality of it. In Colombia, when the country became decentralized, everything started becoming derailed. And while it was being born in many other countries, I just came yesterday from Brazil, there were 10,000 schools in Brazil, escolas activas. In Colombia, things started falling down. And we said, we cannot let this fall down. So we created this NGO to continue maintaining the quality of the model, to continue innovating, because unfortunately, governments are not learning organizations, and they have to reinvent the wheel all the time. So we wanted to make sure we continued innovating. We adapted it to urban schools. We adapted it to displaced children, to migrant populations, and always having research behind demonstrating results. So now we're talking about a new pedagogy for empowerment. Even though we started in the rural schools, now it's a pedagogy for innovation. It's a pedagogy for entrepreneurship. It's a pedagogy for innovation. You have to change your pedagogy if you want to innovate in a country. So this has been like the cycles we went through. And this is why I had to create this NGO from civil society, why we had to make public-private partnerships with the coffee growers in Colombia. And I just want to sort of summarize some takeaways. First one, Yes, it is possible to improve quality education in the poorest of the poor schools in developing countries. Second, more of the same is not enough. We needed a shift of a learning paradigm. We know the theory, but it has to be done. From transmission of knowledge to social construction of knowledge. Third, learning goes beyond just cognitive achievement. We learn to work together, to live in peace. And this is why, for us, research was so crucial, to demonstrate peaceful behaviors and citizenship. Fourth, we need to have systemic way of thinking if we want to lead large-scale reform. Technology is another issue. It can spark education, it can spark change, but you need a new pedagogical model in place. Just introducing computers in the classroom or technologies without changing your pedagogical model perpetuates at a higher cost a traditional technique. So the essence is the pedagogy, and the essence, the way of learning. Seventh, I think is crucial. We learned that you have to work with governments to have big impact, but you need the role of civil society and public-private partnership. Seventh, research was crucial for sustainability. If we did not have research behind, everybody would say, here comes Vicky again with her old model. So you need to have research behind. And last but not least, it's the concept of social participation that embeds the whole model, which is the process by which people share control of their decisions, on their activities, on projects or initiatives of their lives. Evidence shows, and studies have showed, that when there is social participation, you achieve quality and sustainability. And in this case, the actors of change themselves, once it disappeared from the bureaucracy, the teachers, the children, the communities themselves were the actors of change. So this is my big conclusion. And I just want to finalize with something that is so important for me, is the Ashoka's motto. Everybody can really be a change maker. Thank you very much.